Hey everyone, Mark here, and before we dive into today's video, make sure to find me over on Instagram, Coach Mark Estrabio. I offer one-to-one coaching. It's what I do full-time, and the odds are very good. I'd love to work with you. With that being said, let's talk about deadlifts and how I finished the story. And what was the story, you might ask? A 635-pound deadlift before I turned 35. Here's an overview of what I plan on talking about today. First, we're going to talk about build assessment, whether you're a spider crab, a bull, or probably somewhere in between, which is going to be the vast majority of you, and how this impacts your training. Then we're going to discuss weak points within the deadlift. Assistance works both in the terms of muscle groups as well as strength versus skill development. A few sample programs, and then, spoiler alert, when one story ends, another begins, and my road to 675. First and foremost, let's talk a bit about you and how you are put together and how this can affect your deadlift. In much the same way someone who has short arms will give you different bench press advice than someone with a very long wingspan, we want to think about how you're put together and how that affects your conventional stance deadlift. This entire video is going to be about the conventional deadlift, so keep that in mind. And when I talk about these two different builds, bear in mind most of you are probably somewhere in between. And as you go through the video and I talk a bit more, you'll be able to make better informed decisions. With that said, let's talk about our two primary builds. Again, bear in mind you're probably going to be somewhere in between these two different builds, but let's talk about what the builds are. First and foremost is kind of the spider crab build. If you look at all the memes online about deadlift specialists, they're always portrayed as these eldritch abominations with really long legs, long arms. They're just very lanky. And for someone who is built like that, what they'll find is they can really benefit from just training the deadlift more frequently. They better tolerate more volume because every rep has less, shall we say, orthopedic cost. Often, people who are naturally good at deadlifting tend to struggle a bit more on the bench as well as the squat because long arms make the bench a bit more difficult and long femurs will make the squat a bit more difficult. Also, a quick note to my fellow spider crabs out there, even though your build is generally not beneficial for squatting and benching, you don't get to say you're a deadlift specialist if you're really bad at the other two. You probably just need to put in a bit more work. The second archetype of a build is sort of the bull. They tend to have a more hunched over posture. Their hips are higher relative to their shoulders. They might have a more horizontal torso angle. They tend to be a little stockier, a little thicker. People who are naturally good at the bench press, very barrel chested with shorter arms, that's someone who generally is a bull type of deadlifter. As far as how this impacts your training, for the spider crabs out there, you'll generally better tolerate more volume as well as more intensity in much the same way someone with shorter legs can generally squat more often, just they have a natural build that makes it so the lift doesn't beat them up as badly. Whereas the bull type deadlifter, they're going to need lower volume and they're going to need a bit more recovery time to progress long term. As far as how we might go about approaching training the lifts for each of them. For the crab, you're going to focus on deadlifting and variations of the deadlift to leverage your natural build advantages because you can better tolerate it. Whereas bulls, you'll need to deadlift as well as doing more non-deadlift accessory exercises to help you get better long term. However, as again, we continue through this video, I'm going to show you a case example wherein a spider crab might need to focus more on accessories. Now, understanding how your leverages affects your weak links in the deadlift is super important. So, for example, myself as a spider crab, when I deadlift, the block position is actually very natural for me. A slightly elevated low block pull is very close to my actual starting position coming off the floor because I do use a very narrow stance and narrow grip coupled with the bend that you're going to get in a deadlift bar. However, block pulls are actually extremely weak for me. So if I were to train the block pull, what would happen is this is going to help improve my mid-shin position as it's going to reduce my reliance on leg drive to get the bar moving because I have even less knee bend to start the lift when the bar is elevated. Whereas someone who is a bull type lifter, what'll happen is the elevated block allows them to actually have their knee angle very similar, but they're going to have a slightly more vertical torso to start the lift, which means there's going to be less low back and hamstring to begin the lift. So it'll help them improve their mid-range and lockout as a result. Let's talk about assistance work. This is honestly, for some of us, a very exciting topic. For other of us, it tends to be a very boring topic, but either way, it is a topic worth discussing, and I think one of the most important and valuable parts of this video. In terms of assistance work, I like to cluster it into muscle groups. Your hamstrings, your lower back and glutes, upper back, and then your quads/leg drive. For the spider crabs out there, you'll probably need to focus a bit more on leg drive as well as upper back strength because again, you're naturally advantaged to having strong hamstrings and not needing to use your low back as much. Whereas bulls, they're the opposite. Because they're more hunkered over, they're going to need a lot more hamstring and low back to get the deadlift to move upwards. And again, most of us are somewhere between the two, so you'll likely need to change strategies as you go through multiple training cycles. Yeah, get your screenshots ready, folks. This is probably going to be the most valuable slide in this entire video. When it comes to your assistance work, I think one of the biggest problems lifters face is, oh, if you get stronger on this, it'll make the lift go up, but we don't have targets to reach for it. It's the same reason why guys who are just trying to build muscle often don't build as much muscle as they want, because they don't have concrete goals to chase down. So with your assistance work, you want to have numbers that you're chasing. This is going to help orient you and actually take your assistance work more seriously. It's probably one of the biggest problems in lifting in general is people just phone it in when it comes to their accessories. So with all these numbers, what you want to do is you're going to use your deadlift 1 rep max to inform the percentages. So let's start with the hamstrings. For example, you want to be able to do sets of 3 to 5 on the stiff leg deadlift with 75% of your deadlift 1 rep max, or be able to do a Nordic hamstring curl. Lower back and glutes, a 13-inch deadlift or a mid-shin block pull, sets of 3 to 5 with 85%. Back extensions, sets of 6 to 10 with 30%. Upper back, snatch grip deads, sets of 3 to 5 with 75%. For the row, you want to be doing sets of 6 to 10 with 50% or more. And this is a bent over barbell row. Use a little English. This is not a bodybuilding exercise. This is a deadlift building exercise. So that little bit of oomph to help get it moving is going to help get your upper and mid back better at absorbing and controlling the force from a heavy deadlift. For your quads and leg drive, a 2 to 3 inch deficit deadlift, aim for sets of 3 to 5 with 80% or more. For your high bar or SSB squat, sets of 5 to 8 with 65 to 75%. For your front squat, sets of 4 to 6 with 50 to 60%. And then a general all-around developer that I like is the SSB deadlift stance good morning for sets of 5 to 8 with 55 to 65%. You have a bit of a delta on most of these percentages because for the spider crabs out there, they're going to be able to leverage the deadlift variations more readily, whereas they might have a bit of a harder time getting to the higher end of those percentages with the squat, and there's always something to be said for individual variation. Don't live and die by these numbers. Again, these are just good general guidelines for you to chase, but over time you'll figure out what works better for you and what you have the best response to in terms of improving your deadlift. If you look at those numbers and play around them with a bit, you can probably turn around and see where you're lacking as well as where you're actually doing really well. If you find that all your deadlift variations are really high and they're on track percentage-wise, but the non-deadlift movements are very low percentage-wise, what that tells us is you have a very high skill element. So you're a very good deadlifter, but you need to get stronger on a more general sense to improve your deadlift. Whereas let's say you're killing it on all the non-deadlift movements, but all your deadlift variations are very, very lacking. What that tells us is it's a skill issue, so you need to spend a bit more time honing in your technique on the deadlift and just plain getting better at the exercise. You're not going to be able to do every single one of these movements all at once across a training block. It would just be very hard to manage, even if you are the most spidery of spider crabs. However, if you can pick at least one deadlift variation per training cycle as well as 3 to 5 secondary movements, you're in a good place to build a wider foundation for higher peaks in the deadlift. Now that we've talked a bit about theoretical, let's dive into practical. I'm going to show you some sample weeks. The first one we're going to do here is the spider crab week. Day 1, some assisted Nordic hamstring curls, then a 12-inch deadlift, low block pull, a deadlift from the floor, and then cable crunches. And you'll note the set and rep schemes there. In general, with all of these base programs I'm sharing, you just think add weight when it makes sense. Our second day, we're going to go with a high bar or SSB squat, a stiff leg deadlift after that, leg curls, and then back extensions. So you'll notice there's a total of 3 deadlift variations throughout the week for the spider crab because, again, they can better tolerate the movement. Now, if we look at our friend the bull, this is their sample week. We're going to start with deficit deadlifts, 5 to 8 singles, then 5 to 8 singles of a regular deadlift thereafter. Bulgarian split squats, back extensions. The second day, we're going to do a paused back squat, some good mornings, a deadlift stance leg press, and a cable crunch. So they only deadlift 1 day a week. And even then, it's pretty reserved volume, and there are 2 deadlift variations, but they're very close to one another, and again, done in the same session to help consolidate fatigue. We then use a good morning on the second day because it's going to be lower loading than something such as a stiff leg deadlift while still helping reinforce their hinge pattern. And again, that good morning, it's great for hamstrings, glutes, low back, probably my favorite individual compound accessory movement that's not a deadlift to improve the deadlift. Last but not least, this would be kind of the universal generalist template. If you're watching this and you're not sure which one you should run, you should probably just run this template. Day 1, you're going to do a 1.5 rep deadlift. So what that is you deadlift to your knees, back to the floor, and all the way up That's 1 rep. 10 to 12 singles there. Then you're going to do a heavy set of 5 to 8 on bent over rows, drop the weight, do 2 sets of 10 to 12, Bulgarian split squats, back extension. Second day, a paused back squat variation, a trap bar RDL. You could also do a regular bar RDL. I like the trap bar RDL. I find it gets a lot of extra upper back, which is always a bonus because it's almost a pseudo snatch grip RDL, so why not? A deadlift stance leg press, and then a cable crunch. Very simple templates overall, regardless of which one you're picking, whether it be the crab, the bull, or the generalist. But with all of them, you simply add weight when it makes sense and progress it for as long as you can. Good little infinite off-season programs. Now, in the immortal words of the Toby Keith, let's talk about me, talk about I, talk about number one, oh my, me, my, and my next big goal. If I look at my numbers, the story is very clear. On all of my deadlift variations, I am actually exceeding those guideline percentages, except for the low block pull, where I've got a very big deficit. And then on everything that isn't a deadlift, my numbers very, very low, plain and simple. So what this means is I have a very high skill element in the deadlift. However, I also have a relatively weak low back and need more general strength all across the board. So with this in mind, here's how I'm going to go about trying to build the 675 in 2025. So I do have to come up with a cool name for this training cycle. My entire quest for the 635 before 35, I called that Finish the Story. And you know, when one story ends, another begins. So this is me starting into 675. I'm not going to lie, it's a little nauseating staring it down, but here's what the first microcycle is going to look like for myself as I stare down the barrel of this. Day 1, it's a 3-week wave. I'll do axle block pulls to a set of 8, 6, and then 5, depending on what week I'm in. Seal rows, sled push, and ab work. The second day of the week, it's going to be high bar back squats, just density work, bent over rows, and a deadlift stance leg press rest pause style. Now the idea here is that axle block pull is going to absolutely hammer my low back in a deadlift specific manner, allowing me to improve there just across multiple aspects. Then I'm doing rows twice a week to help build my upper back. My rowing strength is really low, and because I have such long arms, I have to spend more time getting better at it. The sled push, again, to help improve my leg strength overall, as well as my conditioning. The high bar back squat is there to improve my leg strength, upper back, and then again, deadlift stance leg press to get a little more leg in there. And then this is the first wave, and then the second wave, what'll likely happen is I'll switch the deadlift variation out to slightly lower block pull and do a little more low back assistance work. Right now, my goal is with every microcycle, I'm gonna really hammer one specific thing, and then once I attack that weakness, in subsequent cycles, I can start branching out and focusing in on other areas. Rather than trying to do everything all at once, I find if I lock in and focus on one thing at a time, I can get more out of it while maintaining it elsewhere. Additionally, my low back is gonna get a fair bit of work if we look at something like the bent over row, even the high bar back squats. So there's enough volume for everything throughout the week to help me get where I wanna be. And because I do want to improve my squatting and pressing in general, the extra upper back work will help me there as well as improving the deadlift. So that is a brief-ish overview of how I might go about programming the deadlift. Again, consider your individual leverages, strengths, and weaknesses. You likely aren't purely a spider crab or purely a bull. You're likely somewhere in between, and that's fine. Training is an evolving process, and as you evolve as a lifter, you'll be able to make better informed decisions. Thank you all so much for watching, and the next time you see me on this YouTube channel, it'll probably be after my birthday, because I'm recording this on October 12th, and my birthday is October 20th, so, you know, if you want to get me a birthday present, let me know. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. And remember, comments and questions are always appreciated. The best questions are ones I will turn into videos, and hit the link down below for a free peaking program, as well as if you are interested in one-to-one coaching. I'll see you next time.